Hey everyone, it's nice to see you all again today for this next session of the IDEA networking session. IDEA stands for Instructional Designers and Educators Alliance, where we come together, former teachers who have made the transition into other careers, specifically learning and development, e-learning and instructional design. My name is Sharon Chaden-Glass. I'm an instructional media designer for Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio in the United States. And before that, I taught English to international students in higher education. And I am so excited to bring you two new guest speakers tonight. As you'll see on the agenda, our first guest speaker has a name that you're never going to be able to guess how to pronounce. I had to ask. Her name is Orla Nihei. Did I get it right? She nods, yes. And that, if you're wondering what language that is, she says it's Irish. Is that right?
Yep, it's Irish.
And then our second guest speaker is Amy. I didn't actually ask you the first name. Was it Faust or Faust?
It's Faust.
Faust, Amy Faust Fraser. So I'm going to let them speak first. Orla will go first, and then Amy will go right after Orla. And as they're speaking, go ahead and write down your questions and think about which person you would like to visit in breakout rooms and ask questions one-on-one or in small groups. Okay, Orla, I'm going to hand it over to you and happy to hear your story.
Cool. Great. Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Sharon, for having me. And hi, everyone. Nice to see you. If I'm kind of speaking kind of low, it's because it's midnight in Ireland at the moment, so I'm trying not to wake my boyfriend who's asleep upstairs. So it's actually Wednesday for me and Tuesday, you guys. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here. So I guess from my experience, if you can see on the agenda that I work for the Citizens Information Board. In Ireland, which I don't know if you have an equivalent in the States or Canada, but basically it's like a public information service for anyone who has questions about maybe social welfare payments or government supports, consumer law, stuff like that. So the Citizens Information Board is the funding body for the Citizens Information Services. So I'm an e-learning executive officer for my full title. Basically, we are a 4-person e-learning team, and we are everything from kind of script writers to instructional designers to building the course to liaising with the SMEs. So we kind of, I only discovered that there's a load of separate roles when I actually did my professional cert in instructional design, and I realized, oh, I actually do a lot of this already. So how I've been working with CIB in Citizen Information Board since April 2021. And before that I was teaching English as a second language in a language school in Dublin. And I'm sure like most people, if anyone is taught in a language school during the pandemic, it was not a good time to be an English language teacher. So I loved teaching, but just kind of by March 2021, I was working 2.5 days a week, like 19 hours a week, and I wanted to get a mortgage and buy a house with my boyfriend, so I had to do something different. So I don't know how much help I'm going to be to anybody, because I just got lucky, and the right opportunity came up for me at the right time. So I got the first job I applied for. So with CIB and with the public service, it's really specific when you're applying for a job here. So my grade is executive officer, and it doesn't matter if I was working in e-learning or in finance or in operations. The competency and the criteria for executive officer is exactly the same. So when it came to doing my interview, I just had to hit these competencies and prove that I had these, people management skills, or that I had problem solving skills or analytical skills. Um, and I have a friend who had done an executive officer interview before. So when I got the interview, I got her to coach me. So I guess I did a bit of interview prep that way. And then when I applied for the job, again, with the civil service and public service, you don't give CVs or resumes. It's an application form. So you, again, it's, you have to be really detailed about your experience, and apply it specific to that job. But it makes it easier to think about how your previous work might apply and transfer, even if you might not necessarily have the relevant experience. Like when I applied for the job, I'd never heard of Articulate Storyline, for example. It's a program I use every single day. Um, and there was, a lot of video editing software that I had no idea to use. But when I was looking through the job spec, the only things that I wasn't ticking off that I could do was the software. And I was like, well, that's something I can learn. But like, I was teaching for, about 4 years. I had also experience as a center manager. I had experience dealing with clients previously. I'd been working as an accountant. You can see I have an MA in journalism. I have a degree in English. So things like script writing, things like dealing with people, things like, the kind of research skills, all of that stuff that goes into instructional design, like that was stuff I could already do standing on my head, and I knew I could do it. So when I was looking at the job spec, I didn't let the lack of experience in e-learning put me off. And I just kind of looked, okay, these are the skills I already have that are a lot harder to learn in a short space of time. And then they're going to train me on the software if I don't know how to do it. Or it's something I can learn in my own time. And something that helped as well, I was already in my own time doing a course on learning and development on Udemy. So it was just a free course, but I was already looking to change. So I think it possibly helped in my application that I was kind of motivated to get into the sphere. Um, and then I guess another thing for my application that I did specifically for my job is that we had to write a short piece on buying a train ticket from Dublin to Cork. So don't know if anyone's been to Ireland, or if you're familiar where Dublin is, but Dublin's on one side of the country, Cork's on the other. And so literally what I did was I went on to the Irish Rail website, and I did a step-by-step screen grab of how I would buy a ticket online. And it was, that was my piece, and that I submitted, and I just kind of, wrote a little bit around it, but I included screenshots. And, if any of you have done any good e-learning course, or you know, any kind of course in general in any classroom or anything like that, you'll see that usually it will include, some images and very simple instructions and stuff. So that was kind of the approach I took. It's kind of, when you get into instructional design and you compare it to teaching, it's actually pretty similar. You follow the same pedagogy of what are my learning objectives, how am I going to, what's the best way to get the information across. um, like the first thing that I start with our courses, like if it's a brand new course, it will actually be talking to my subject matter expert. Like I said, I'm for the Citizens Information Board, so we cover like anything. We'll cover anything that's government funded, or any supports that our citizens could avail of. We have to have a course on that, for not for the public, but for our information providers. So they have to be accurate. Um, and then, it has to allow the volunteers and the employees to be able to answer questions from the public. So um, we're not going to know all that. We're a 4-person team. So the first people I will talk to would be we have a digital content team who manage our website. So that's usually the first place I go. So the last course I just finished writing a script on illness and disability payments, for example. Um, that's not a brand new course. That's a course that we're kind of reviewing every year, which we review every year. And then we had a budget in September where they announced changes to some of the rates, but that won't actually get finalized until March. So even though the script is done and it's been checked and it's verified to the website, and I kind of know what rate that they're going to pay people, that's not actually official until March. So we can't release that course until March. So it's in a way it's nice for me because it gives me plenty of time now to figure out a design. So if in the breakout rooms you know of a nice design for illness and disability, I'd be interested in hearing about that. Um, but yeah, so it's like, and then the next thing after script then would be my manager would review it, and then we try and come up with a good theme for the course then. So something to make it look interesting and that it's related to the material, but that it's also going to be memorable for the learners. Generally our courses are about 45 minutes long, 40 to 45 minutes long, depending on the content. And yeah, I'm just trying to think what else I can share with you. Like again, I think I did a professional certificate in instructional design in the summer with my colleague, and one of the things that struck me on that is that we're myself and my colleague Sam are very specific to public service, and we were unique on the course in that we don't work for an e-learning design company. We work for a public body, and so all of our courses are in-house. So we're not paid by the people we produce the courses for. Whereas I think a lot of people on that course, they were working for like an instructional design company. So they had, again, a wide range of topics, but they had clients that they met with, and they had, they maybe produced different courses and one-offs, whereas we'd actually go back to our courses year after year, review them, make sure the content is up to date. So I think it was maybe a little different in this way. And one of the things that I like about the courses that we do is that our learners aren't the final users. They pass on the information to the public. So I'm like, that's kind of cool. Like, that it's kind of going a bit further. But yeah, I'm I don't know. That's kind of been my experience so far. I'm relatively new still. I've a year and a half. Started in April 2021, but yeah, I'm really loving it, and definitely found that the skills that I've picked up in teaching and lesson planning, and it's really transferable to e-learning. And if there's only one thing that you'll take away from tonight, like that would be my biggest piece of advice is that if you're not in instructional design or e-learning already, you're thinking of moving, just look at a job spec and see, okay, like how does this relate to teaching? What can I already do here? And how much of it relates to software, and discount the software part straight away. That's something you can learn. That's something that's very easy to pick up. It's on Moodle, it's on LinkedIn Learning. Like, that's stuff that it's like learning to ride a bike or drive a car or anything like that. It's a tool that you use. It's not actually e-learning or instructional design. That's just the thing that you use to help. The same way you'd use Word document or PowerPoint. I gave a talk to some ELT teachers recently about e-learning, and the way I described articulate storylines, it's like PowerPoint on steroids. So it's if you can use PowerPoint, you can learn how to use storyline, basically. So it's the one thing that just, if you don't have the software, don't let that put you off. If you are any good at lesson planning and designing material, adapting material, if you've had to adapt things for online, then you will definitely be able to apply those skills to an instructional designer e-learning role.
Yeah, when you said like I'm not sure I'll have much to, I'm like, yeah, you'll have lots to say. I mean, you already have lots to say. Amy, are you ready?
I am.
All right, I'm handing it over to you.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you, Sharon, for having me, and for everyone joining this evening. I know how busy you are, and I was have been in your shoes for a couple of years as I was job searching and being a career transitioner and going to every single webinar and every single event that I could get my hands on. So I know how it is, and I know how important your time is. My story is a lot different than Orla, so I'm glad that we kind of have different stories to share. I actually have two transition stories to talk about. I can focus heavily in on my transition from teacher to not ID, but I was a professional learning specialist or a learning and development specialist. And then recently I made a transition to a customer success manager, and I can talk about that a little bit. So yes, I have about 15 years of experience, started off as an elementary teacher, made my way to an instructional coach, a literacy coach, where I got my feet wet doing a lot of professional development and working more with the teachers. So on the adult side and going into a lot of different classrooms, seeing different things, creating a lot of different materials for those professional development sessions. And like many of you realized, I don't know if teaching is where I'm going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. I was kind of really itching to do something else, but I didn't know what that other thing was. I had no idea. And this is back in 2014. So in 2014, that was the last K-12 position I had. I was a K-12, or excuse me, a K-8 RTI, response to intervention coordinator. A blurby of words, basically worked in the district office supporting teachers and rolling out our intervention programs and services at the district. Not that fulfilling by any means. So I started looking, and like Orla, my first transition to L&D was to a company called WIDA, or the WIDA Consortium. If you've heard of it, it's a company that supports educators across the US and internationally that work with multilingual learners. So it's something that was very near and dear to my heart. I did have a friend or a colleague, former colleague, that was working there at the time. And when she came to me about the opening, I said, there's no way I can do professional development. I don't have enough experience, specifically working with diverse learners. I don't have anything important to say to adults across the US. And she said, no, you do. You're just going to interview and give it your all. So in 2014 in June, it was a remote position at that time, back when remote was not a thing. So I flew to Madison, Wisconsin. It was housed at the University of Wisconsin, and I had to do a big presentation with content that I had no idea. It was all new learning to me. So I just did it. Went through the interviews there and accepted that position. So for 8 years, I worked at WIDA, and through that evolution, my job title changed about 3 or 4 times. So I was hired as a professional learning specialist, where the bulk of my work was facilitation. So I would fly to all the states that were our customers and do professional development at the state and national level. So teachers coming in from across the states, sometimes 40 teachers, sometimes 5, sometimes 200. So really got my feet wet with professional speaking, which was actually a big fear of mine. So conquered that fear. When the pandemic hit, or even about, I'd say 1 or 2 years before the pandemic, the company was really upping its game on asynchronous learning. We did not have instructional designers at the time. The learning specialists were all we had, but we were slowly putting courses on Moodle. We didn't have an LMS at the time. So then the pandemic hit and everything shifted because we could not fly, obviously, for 2-3 years. And so we had to change all of our face-to-face learning to asynchronous learning. So that was a big task. We also needed to pump out as many courses as we could asynchronously, as well as start planning for the future on what face-to-face would look like, AKA they would become hybrid courses. So for about 3 years at WIDA, we hired 5 instructional designers that were on one team. And then I became a learning and development specialist. And so I worked very closely with our instructional designers. And that's where I got my interest in instructional design. But in all the roles, because they were my counterpart, my colleague, I was always the SME, so the subject matter expert. So I had the content, I would bring it, I would storyboard, I would do all the storyboarding. We helped create, we had a 8-step design process. So we went from identifying by needs assessment, what were the needs of the educators. We did deep dive literature reviews. We did surveys, what do our customers want? Then we went into heavy design and development where we pulled in those instructional designers. And then that's where I got my feet wet, learning how to storyboard, learning about ADDIE, learning about adult learning theory. I had professional development funds, so I did everything to learn about e-learning because it was new. I took a micro learning course that was really interesting to me. Let's see, what else did I do? I joined ATD. I went to a couple of their virtual conferences during the pandemic. Our IDs were strongly using at the time Articulate Storyline and Rise and Beyond. And so while I wasn't actually doing the ID work, I got to see what my content and my teammates, the content, we were the subject matter experts. So I got to see what was coming to life through Beyond. And so I was very familiar with the programs, but I never used them myself. I had interest in using them, but that's a different story. So another thing that I was able to do for that few years is become a team lead. So able to lead a design team through that design process, which usually took about 6 months. That was the time allotted to do the design process from ideation to a launch. So a pilot and then launch. And then we spent a couple of months refining that pilot and refining our materials and whatnot. So that was really good, like supervisory managerial experience that I got as well. So all this time, now we're coming out of the pandemic, 2022, fast forward, and I realized that I don't think I want to live on an airplane anymore and do all the facilitation that I was doing. I loved e-facilitation. I love moderating and facilitating webinars. It is my jam. But to get into a plane post-pandemic and fly to Pennsylvania and then Hawaii and then Montana and then Florida, it was just a lot. So at that time in my life, I realized, I think I'm going to be an instructional designer, because at that time, now all of these on LinkedIn, it was booming. Sarah Stevick with the teaching a path to L&D, Jill Davidian, all these people were promoting become an instructional designer. That's what educators do. That's how they get out of the classroom. So while I wasn't in the classroom per se anymore, I had all this experience. I still considered myself a transitioning teacher because I live and breathe as an educator. So I figured that's my route. That's what I'm going to do. So I did my resume with the help of Sarah Stevick, and I had all the skills there. The only thing I didn't have is I have never used the programs myself. So that was one hurdle I had to overcome. So I started taking some courses on LinkedIn. I worked with a couple of people, LinkedIn colleagues or friends that I had met, and I realized this is hard. It was a lot hard. I don't know how techie I am or not techie, but for me, and I'm a PowerPoint master, I can blast out a PowerPoint like that and make it look really good. But to me, I was struggling. And I realized that I really liked planning out the learning from ideation all the way and what the learner will experience. I don't necessarily enjoy sitting behind the computer doing the actual small, tedious work. So then I kind of thought, maybe I want to be a learning experience designer to be in charge of that whole process. I'm not just doing e-learning. There might be other facets of the position that I might enjoy. So I started broadening my horizons, and I didn't know about the portfolio. To get a job now, you have to have a portfolio. And I didn't have one. And all the materials that I had created at WIDA were protected. So I copyrighted. I couldn't use any of those materials. So I figured if this was the route I was going to take, it was going to be a long route. And I realized I don't know how or when. I think just by talking to a lot of people and knowing what the IDs did at at WIDA, what they were actually doing, I realized maybe that's not for me. I really like talking to people. I don't know how much I wanted to be behind my computer versus I like a balance of talking to people, helping them do a quick demo, get in there, get in the product, get out, maybe make some customer education things, that kind of thing. And so there were two things at the time, 2021, 2020, 2021. If you're an educator, to get out of the classroom, you become an instructional designer or a project manager or a customer success manager. And so that was one of the first times I heard the term CSM. And I started looking at jobs and realizing, oh, I'm doing a lot of those things. Maybe I really could do this, but plus I get to be customer facing, outward facing from a company. So obviously the natural transition I thought would be to an education technology company, and realized that that was getting to where I am now in 2022 was one of the hardest things I ever did. Looking back, I think if I had gone and applied to be like a training specialist or facilitator, voiceover, that kind of thing, it would have been easy. But it honestly was one of the hardest things. Because I wasn't coming out of the classroom. I had this other experience. I thought it was going to benefit me, and everything was just hard. So I upskilled as much as I could. I took every single course. The biggest thing that helped me was networking, not finding other teachers that were in the same boat as me. That was a part of it, but finding people that were already in that role, in that job, and talking to them and finding out what their day-to-day was. What were the pain points of the company? How did you get there? What suggestions do you have? What's the interview process like? What was your process like? So I had a better, clear idea of what I was actually getting into. So my first strategy was apply. That didn't work. My second strategy was take a step back, figure out my resume, network as much as I could. And then when I felt more comfortable and confident and upskilling, then start applying. And I left WIDA in June of 2014 because I had an offer from an ed tech company for a customer success position. The 2 days before, no, about a week before I was supposed to start, they put the position on hold. So I was actually out of work for 3 weeks until I found my next position, which was my first customer success position. That was in, I think, in August, I believe August. And I started at an HR services company as a customer success manager. That was an interesting position because I was hired as the first customer success manager. So nobody else to help me, no mentors, no peers, no colleagues. It was great. I was really excited about it, but I realized that I'm going to need some more support. I'm a first-time CSM and I want a team. I'm really into teamwork and collaboration, working with different stakeholders within a company. Company was really small. And so things moved really quickly from August to now. I actually kept applying for CSM roles, and I had 2 offers all within about a week, from one, an electrical vehicle charging company that was kind of not out of my realm, and then one from an education technology company. And so within that week, I chose the education technology company, and I've been there 3 weeks, just 3 weeks. I haven't even put it on LinkedIn yet. And I think I found my spot. So that was my journey. I'm happy to talk more about what life was like at WIDA, as that was my L&D role. Happy to talk about how I made my decision, or if you're even interested in customer success as a path as well. Seeing if I left anything out that I was going to think about. I don't think so.
Yeah, I love that both of you had very different stories to share and different paths, different. Like Orla's like, well, I don't know if I have anything to say because I just got lucky. But she did have plenty to say, especially about this experience of finding out all the skills that transferred. And then Amy had a very different experience, like it was really hard, did a couple different paths.
Oh, and Sharon, I just added, I forgot the one other thing that I did do besides networking. I did huddle up with about 10 people that were current teachers at the time. And we formed our own little LinkedIn group, and we would check in with each other. And actually that group to this day, now everyone has moved into CSM roles. We were all pursuing CSM. They're all now, we're all at different companies, but we still use that group as we're learning our roles, learning this new profession. So it was nice to have those buddies or those that little group to rely on, because also you don't know where people are going to land. You don't know where they're going to be in 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months. They could be working in a company that you want to work in. So find those people, your people. It doesn't have to be 30 of them, but find, 6 or 10 that you can bounce ideas off. When I was getting assignments, which is the typical interview thing, do an assignment. Whenever I would get one, I would throw it past the group and get some help, get some support.
Yeah. What we call that in teacher education is communities of practice, right? It's the exact same thing. And it's the very, very best advice is to find people in the same boat and you build your skills together. It's great advice. Okay, everybody. We have a couple minutes for some question answer session. Before I do that, I want to make sure to mention that the next time that we're going to meet is right after the new year. Okay, it is 3rd. It's Tuesday, January 3rd, 7 to 8 p.m. So again, the first Tuesday of the month. Do feel free to unmute yourself and share your question. I'm also going to put the feedback form in the chat if you would like to fill that out for me.
Hi, Sharon, nice to meet you. I'm Michal. Thank you so much for, this is the first time that I'm participating in this, and I'm a teacher looking to transition. And okay, this might be a strange question, and tell me if there is no answer to that question, but I'm literally drowning in resources at the moment. I'm a new mom. I have a son who is 5 months old. I'm trying to wiggle, like to do everything together. I'm like, what's the first thing I should do? I literally don't know. I'm speaking to everyone who will speak with me, and I'm asking questions about what's an instructional designer, what does he do? What's the first, like someone told me, okay, start reading descriptions of jobs on LinkedIn, and I'm doing it, but I have to say that I don't really understand what they're saying, and I don't think that's a language barrier. It's just like I read the words, I understand them, but I still like, what? And that's just discouraging. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should stop that and do something else that would help me understand the job descriptions. And what about the technology? When should I approach it? And like, what should I start with? So that might be just too big of a question. Let me know if you can't answer it. And thanks anyway.
Yeah. Or Orla or Amy, do either of you want to take that one? I'll jump in here. So this is what I would say. I would say my best advice is start by figuring out what kind of job you want. There's no point of going any further if you're not, I mean, as Amy said, she changed her mind along the way and was like, actually, I really don't know if this is what I want to do. I would find the job description that appeals to you. If you're confused by something in a job description, just move on. There's job descriptions that you'll find that you're like, oh, I can see what that is. That's where I would start, figuring out what interests me, what would I like to do, and then when you're confused about what is in the job description, then you can go out and investigate. I mean, that's what I would say. Orla or Amy, do either of you want to speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. Like one thing I was saying to the two ladies in the breakout room was also look at maybe some of the skills that you haven't thought of, like when you figure out the job that you want as well. Like if you're teaching, or even if you, like I had a previous background as an accountant, for example, and I'm writing finance scripts now in my thing. So maybe a good place to start as well is to look at your own experience and say, okay, what do I have, and how can I make it apply to the job I want as well? So try and look at things that you might not think of that are skills when they actually might be.
I see in the chat, Nirakar said I can share how I started. Nirakar, are you there?
Yeah, it's Narakar.
Nirakar, sorry.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, I've been to a few of these networking sessions and I've heard a lot of like the guest speakers, and it seems to me the very common aspect is not what happened in Orla's case. It's not, I got the first job I applied for, which is really cool. But, coming from someone who was in education, 10 years, same idea was like, oh, I'm just going to apply like you do for schools. You just throw some applications out there and then hopefully you're going to get it, and that, doesn't work. And I think I at first was like, oh, I'll do this. This will be like a 3-4 week ordeal, right? And then I quickly realized after like probably hundreds of job applications where it's like I didn't have the portfolio. I was like, I could learn the software, but I didn't have anything like tangible. And I was talking with one of my friends who was like, it has designer in the name, and you're going to go and pitch yourself as a designer, like an artist. And then they're like, well, what do you make? And then you're like, I can make it. And you don't have like an example of your work. So I kind of started thinking, okay, if this designing is what I'm going for, right? This instructional designing, even if it's the implementation and working with people, or if it's the development. So I'm actually in Articulate, doing the coding and whatever. I decided I needed a portfolio. But then, just like you had brought up earlier about where to start, I kind of looked at it as, I spend an inordinate amount of time scrolling through TikTok and Instagram and, watching YouTube, right? What if you take that time? And I just like got on little kicks. So I watched all of the TPLD instead of like scrolling through TikTok. I just started watching Sarah Stevick's videos, and then going to the playlists under Devlin, right? And that's all I would focus on for that little bit. Just instead of scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through TikTok, I would just listen to Devlin Peck's thing on the learner analysis, right? And then the next one, the next week, and I started with this idea that this is not a 4-week endeavor. This is now a 6 to 12 month endeavor, right? That you have the time to just take it in nice little bite-sized chunks. And then I started setting aside some time on like a weekend where I was like, okay, I'm going to take 2 hours and I'm actually going to go through one of Devlin's like storyline tutorials, going through and like making the avatar scrolly thing. And then, the next weekend I took another 2 hours and just like really pieced it together. And I think the biggest takeaway was the language actually that Janelle brought up. There is like such a big difference between the K-12 language and the corporate language. And I think I'm very fortunate to have a best friend I went into education and he went into corporate. And, I started talking to him like, this is really how you talk. And then he said the same thing back though. Like the K-12 world is full of acronyms and all of these things and stuff. And it's just code switching over to corporate and kind of getting over that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. Like Janelle said, but that little piece, right? Just like pick a video, pick EduFlow. I went through a LinkedIn learning kick for like 2 weeks. I just listened to it while I drove, so I know that like everyone here, right? They put in 500 resources into the chat. Like it's out there. Yeah. Just pick one. It doesn't matter.
And I just added into the chat the my playlist for all these previous networking sessions, which if you go back, you'll realize that the name idea was not something I started with. I just, when did I start that? April 2021, it looks like, maybe, or maybe not. Anyway, we are about out of time. I went through this playlist too. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. I hope that I see you guys back here in January. I want to give a special thanks to my speakers, Orla and Amy, for coming today and sharing your experience. I really, really appreciate you guys being here. It means so much to me when people share their time and their expertise. And if you want to register for the January session, I'm putting the registration link in the chat. And I hope to see you guys back then. And good luck on your interviews and sending out applications. And I hope you have good news in the next coming months. Have a great night, all. See you next time.